We are jumping straight into the cybersecurity session, and I'm
Where is
happy.
our panel?
Do we have a panel, or it's just two of us jazzing? Vladimir Radunović from DiploFoundation, Tatiana Tropina from Max Planck Institute. So we'll try to guide you through this session, and as Tatiana said, we have the panelists. Well, they're here.
Oh,
I see a lot of them.
Here they are.
We don't know them actually, but there are a lot of them. But there are actually three resource persons that are going to be sitting at these tables. So you can take your seats the way you like. The fourth one is from the security service, and they are invisible, of course.
But they are watching us.
They are always watching us. So should I
Yes,
say, Milan, you
please,
can take a
feel
seat.
free.
If I go from the right to the left, Axel Pawlik, the managing director of the RIPE NCC. Axel, welcome to Belgrade. Desiree Miloshevic with many hats, ISOC and Afilias among them, but this time more with a hat of a business and corporate sector, Afilias. And Milan Sekuloski from the Geneva Center for Control of Armed Forces. Did I pronounce it well? Democratic Control of Armed Forces. Shorted as DCAF, which, as Milan says, doesn't have anything to do with coffee. Besides that, I do need to present the people that helped bringing up this panel, and they're helping us today as well. So we have Radoslav Rizov, who is from Microsoft Bulgaria, who is going to help us with remote participation, and Fotjon Kosta from the Ministry of Energy and Industry in Albania, who is taking notes and will be a rapporteur. There was also Predrag Tasevski from Cybersecurity Macedonia, and Matthew Shears from the Center for Democracy and Technology, but they were not able to join us today in vivo. Maybe they're remotely.
Well,
So,
I hope they are with us in spirit, so let's say.
before I pass the floor to you to give us a brief overview of what we are going to do today, I just wanted to make an observation. I like this title of the session, Security. And it reminds me of some discussions that were at the IGF, and not only at the IGF, about the Balkanization. So the Balkanization is usually used in this internet governance context, unfortunately, to explain the possibility of fragmentation of the internet. And even though, besides the Balkans deserves a second chance, there are a lot of technical and political gaps in using this term, so let's use fragmentation. We were hoping that through some of the discussions in the region, and maybe cybersecurity can be the one, we can actually bring the Balkanization as a very positive trend. So maybe the security can also become a positive trend if we start discussing security in the region. Tatiana.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Vlada. I would like to point out that maybe this is the most unfortunate set of speakers because they are going to wait before we are going to give word to them. I have been chairing many sessions on cybersecurity in my life, and frequently I hear as a feedback that people think that cybersecurity session requires any special knowledge or like to participate even in the audience or to understand the issues. I want to highlight that this session is not for us, it's not for resource people, it's for you. We want to hear your voice. We want to hear what do you think about global cybersecurity problems and their dimension on the regional level. But if you feel like you want to ask any question, if something is not clear or you want to raise any concern, please just feel free, raise your hand and we will give you a microphone. Because one of the primary focus of this session is also awareness among us and capacity building. And with this in mind, I will give the floor to Vlada again and then to you. So we are going to ask you some questions.
Yeah, those guys are just helping us look nice over there.
We had to have a panel, you know.
Yeah, they always asked us to put a panel on. Now we'll get back to you. The question, actually, we start from you. The question is very simple. Why did you come today here? I mean, for the cybersecurity session. What do you want to talk about? What are the challenges in the region that you want to raise today? And I'm not kidding. So anyone, jump in. What do you want to talk? Nebojša.
Again, Nebojša, Dragoje, Bosnia and Herzegovina. First comment on the panel. As it was promised, now it's 43.43 ladies in the panel. Security. There are so many aspects when it comes to the cybersecurity. We can talk about security, physical security of the infrastructure, different types of violation during the communication on the internet, phishing, all other possible aspects. But maybe one of the not maybe the biggest, but very important aspect is recently most talked about misuse actually of internet for different terroristic purposes, starting from different distribution of instruction in that communication sense, then recruiting the newcomers, and to say ideologically poisoning the complete internet audience. The problem with the misuse of social networks is obvious. If you read some articles on that subject, you will hear that this country or that country canceled, I don't know, so many Twitter accounts or Facebook accounts. But then we come to the very complex issue of human rights on internet. Who is one who should decide which one is of those accounts is really actually danger to the security, and if certain regimes in a country can make a parallel to the same practices in other countries, saying if you see that as a danger, we can see this in our country as a danger. So my opinion is that it could be more and more important issue to discuss when it comes to the security and actually misuse of internet and through that violating the general security.
Thank you very much. I'm doing my homework for listing these issues.
Another comment. So, Nebojša, you mentioned a couple of already. You took all my points. Terrorism, propaganda, content policy, human rights, at least. Introduce yourself, please.
Hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Nevena Ružić. I work for the Information Commission of the Republic of Serbia. We deal with free access to information and personal data protection. And coming to this session, unfortunately, I couldn't have come earlier. I have come because I'm interested in hearing how much or how few national cybersecurity strategies dedicated their time or chapters to human rights. Why I'm saying that, several months ago I had the privilege to analyze something that was called the Cybersecurity National Strategy of the Republic of Moldova. And unfortunately there I couldn't find any strong reference to human rights protection. And just for the sake of comparison, I took my time and looked into other national strategies and realized that's actually a pattern rather than, it's rather an exception to have a serious chapter, elaborated chapter on human rights and the impact of human rights for cybersecurity protection. And I would be interested in hearing more. Why is that so? Maybe I'm a human rights lawyer, and perhaps I'm lacking perception why this is necessary or this is not necessary to have it. And if I'm right, and if I'm not wrong, how can we change that? So this is what I'm interested in. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. So before I pass the floor, is there anyone from Moldova who wants to comment? Do we have anyone from Moldova today? No? Okay. Remotely? No, not one yet. No. If we get any comment, but we'll get back to that. We're trying to map different concerns.
Good afternoon. Natalia from Georgia. Hearing all these challenges and threats coming of from the cyber domain. I'm interested to see your perspective, how we as major producers of e-services and ICT solutions, how should we build trust and confidence of the society in using whatever we as government, we as private sector are doing for public good? How to build this trust? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's do a round. We have a lady here, and then two gentlemen there.
Thank you, Vlada. Alexandra Kulikova, ICANN. I think we need to make a bridge, actually, with the first session where we talked about multi-stakeholder approach. And this is something which is essential for cybersecurity as well, and that becomes more and more prominent since the operators of, say, critical infrastructure are predominantly private players. So I think it is a really important issue to discuss how top-level decisions on cybersecurity and on developing cybersecurity strategies is actually filtered through to other players, how private sector is engaged, how expertise is drawn from academia and tech community. And linked to that, in a way, how high-level decisions on, for instance, fighting cybercrime and preventing conflict in cyberspace is also solved with the help of other stakeholders. This is a very complex question, and I think it's really important to bring it onto the table. Thanks.
Thanks, Alexandra. I'm going to lose even more weight running around. But in the meantime, is there anyone from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here? We don't have any. Okay, Nebojša, one from Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Because we touched upon the high politics, so I just wanted to check how many of Ministry of Foreign Affairs we have. Okay, next two here. Who was that?
Hi, I'm Matei Vasile from Association for Technology and Internet from Romania. And I would like you to, well, at least start to try and clarify the issue. What do we mean by cybersecurity? Is it information security, IT security, or is it national security, or a mix of the two? Because people use this term to mean various things, and that's a big issue.
Thanks.
I may ask the nasty question. I'm Bogdan from APTI in Romania. So why is cybersecurity being used as a buzzword in order to promote all the worst surveillance laws in relation to IT?
Irina Rizmal, Center for Euro-Atlantic Studies. Building on the questions about the industry, what is the role of industry in the form of public-private partnerships in pushing for a greater agenda for cybersecurity governance in the region, and how far can industry go in these efforts?
Hi, I'm Valentina Pavel, also from APTI. I'm super curious, why is security more important than privacy, for example? Because we all know human rights have equal footing and all human rights must be guaranteed, but somehow security always comes up on the list and other human rights like freedom of speech or privacy go down. And why is this in the perception of different actors?
Thanks a lot. So we have one more over there.
Yeah, we have one more intervention.
Then we can summarize where we are, right? Sure.
Okay, so words reflect ourselves. So we talk about security, now safety. Security usually are the big, tough issues. Safety are the people issue. I'm interested in, when we talk about cybersecurity and we think of groups like Hacking Team, and they can hunt down and out people, citizens, under the veil of safe national safety or from the bad guys. And then when the people try to be anonymous or less visible, then they're again the bad guys or girls.
Thanks, Valentina. So I pass the floor to Tatiana. She has a full, full script of summary over there.
I did a bit of homework because some of the interventions were talking about the same issues. So on the basis of what I have written, I'm going to make a short assignment for our panel. So you will have a word. And my first question would be to every of you, because several people in the audience talked about the meaning of cybersecurity. So just briefly, imagine that you have just to say a few words what cybersecurity means for you from your perspective. And then I have particular questions assigned to some of you. So to Milan, I would like you to talk a bit about human rights. And Desiree and Axel, I would like to talk about your perspective on cooperation, trust, and multi-stakeholder models. So what is important for you from business perspective and from technical community perspective? So who is going to start? Who is going to give us the definition, the meaning of cybersecurity for him or for herself? So Milan?
Okay. I'd like to, well, to make the question even harder. I mean, I would rather start not with what is cybersecurity, but what is security and what kind of security are we talking about? Because during the 90s, the whole notion of security has changed. And so bear in mind that in modern societies, in democracies, and this would go for all countries in the region, we are no longer speaking about state security. We're speaking about human security. So we're speaking about, so in this concept, it is crucial that actually privacy and human rights are not opposed to security. The institutions are there to secure our privacy, to secure our human rights are respected, to secure that we are protected from all the threats coming from physical or cyberspace. And so this is where I come from. This is the way the organization I work for, and this is how we look at things. I don't know. I mean, I saw a lot of interesting points here that were raised. So the way I would look at cybersecurity as part of the security policy and part of an effort to ensure security of all citizens, of all business entities, of the whole society. So in that regard, I really like. I didn't know that national cyber, and I didn't notice that national cyber securities do not reflect on human rights. And this is also something that I have noticed that when we speak about cybersecurity in terms of institutions, in terms of capacity building in our societies, we usually speak about building efficiency. We rarely speak about accountability, and those things have to follow. If they don't, then we are not securing human rights, then we are not providing human security. We're doing something else. We're doing it wrong. And this is something where, I mean, my background comes from security sector reform, and this is a concept where you actually try to build on those two. You try to build efficiency of the institutions, and you try to build their accountability in parallel. And coming from that perspective, I would like to throw in another thing for discussion and deliberation. I would advocate for more state in cybersecurity, more state institutions, because of the efficiency. The security services, the secret services, or the police, they're not our enemy. They're not the enemy of the citizens. They're supposed to protect us. They have a social role. And they have to be efficient in performing that role. They have to be efficient in stopping the terrorist recruitment that was mentioned, or any other kind of threats, crime or whatever. But also they have to be accountable. And there are mechanisms which are not, well, in our region especially, far from perfect, but in all Europe also, in the traditional democracies also. But there are mechanisms of accountability, and we have to strengthen them. And we have to connect these two processes. So I hope this all doesn't make the mess even messier. So I will stop here, and then we can...
I'm just looking at the faces when you mentioned we need more security services involved in cybersecurity. That's going to be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, so anyone wants to make any point concerning these two issues? First of all, more... Excellent, I will give you a microphone.
Yeah, you're wrong. We don't need more state into... well, we don't need more state, period, but we definitely don't need more state in cybersecurity, because if you'd ask me, we don't need cybersecurity. We need information security, which should be kept separated from national security. And what cybersecurity is, and I always see it around when a new cybersecurity legislation is being drafted, is that we mash together national security with information security so that national security can take over information security and completely unaccountably mess with the internet and pretty much everything digital.
We have one response to that, and then I'll pass to Wolf.
Sorry, just to make it clear, I'm advocating accountable state interference, not...
Is there such a thing?
Okay, no, okay.
That's a question.
I'm sorry, I must say I don't agree with you, because we do need state and information security if you're talking about control of information systems that control critical infrastructure, for example.
Don't hook it up to the internet and you're golden.
Okay, should we move on, Wolf, and then we can get back and see what the other two think actually cybersecurity is. Wolf.
Wolf Ludwig. You are saying accountable. All my political experience, which is quite long, tells me the opposite. Even in some sort of a good legal state, where you have rule of law, whether you take Switzerland, whether you take Germany. I know the German case better than I know the Swiss case. In Germany, I can tell you, there are so many parliamentarian gremias to control the Secret Service, which never worked. So it's wishful thinking. Your scenario would be okay to me in a perfect state. But a perfect state is a contradiction in itself. And as long as I have no guarantees from a citizen's point of view that accountability mechanisms work, I'm not prepared as a citizen to give even more power to any law enforcement or secret services.
This is really not comforting if you say that in Germany. What can we expect in Southeastern Europe then? Come on.
It is interesting because we have two people agreeing, two people disagreeing, and Valentino, you want to have a word?
Yes.
Sorry, I cannot thank Milan. It's amazing what you said, because you just remind us how easily we gave up on what the government and police enforcement are supposed to do, and that we accept in real life the same rule of the click, accept a term of reference that will be constantly changed without our acceptance. I think it's brilliant. Thank you.
Now, this boils down to what we discussed also this morning. Do we trust our governments all in all? So that's a bigger issue than cyber. But should we move on to the other two to see what they're...
Yes.
How do they understand cybersecurity?
Hello, so I will start with maybe just saying, harking back of how the internet was developed, and over the last 30 decades, at least in the 20th century, we have seen that it's been a melange of military strategy. It has been a big contribution it was a big science corporation and technical entrepreneurship in the late 90s. And then we had a huge contribution of this counterculture hackers, people that contributed to the development of the internet. And as such medium, we do live today with those consequences, whereby we have these digital networks where we can send images, files, and sounds, and there's some decentralized nodes. Something earlier we heard from the person who was speaking at the Bitcoin little intervention, lightning talk. So where are we now in your questions about what kind of data do we need to secure? I personally see two types of data. I see government data that has a lot of data about the citizens they need to protect, let's say, be it a tax data, and they would like to keep this data locally. They'd like to no one to interfere with it. They'd like to store it and secure it in order to make it less vulnerable vulnerable to attacks, be it technical, DDoS attacks, all sorts of misuse. But also then I see this other data, information security of internet users and citizens, and also data of corporations that needs to be protected. And that data is something where we don't see a clear distinction. Once you start using services, social network media or Google, well, there you go. I think even your tax data will go to another country, and therefore we see this need for cooperation among many stakeholders to work together in order to solve some of the potential misuse. And there are many good points and good questions raised in the audience. I don't know which way you want to turn them on, but I just wanted to make this really clear distinction of the government data and your agencies. You usually go for the cheapest solutions, and I mean, not personally Serbia, but I think this is, you get an outsource provider, and then there are so many data breaches that we hear every day that happen, not just within government agencies, but also within corporations and banks and so on. So how do we even start talking about cybersecurity when there's no one to detect cybersecurity breaches? Where do we start? And then we can have a discussion what kind of policies, arrangements, and what kind of coordination we need among all other stakeholders. I'll stop here to give my colleague.
Desiree, just a question from the moderatorial. Do you, I mean, relating to accountability and cheapest solution, do you think that if we are talking about accountability, it's not only who governments have to be accountable, but businesses as well, or not?
Certainly, I don't think I mentioned the word accountability in terms of securing the data. I think that's another topic. And as we saw this morning earlier, not all businesses are alike. But we can talk about corporations also being nudged by the government to give their data, and also about governments using internet users' data for in order to deliver them better services and serve them more ads. That's the data exploitation, and that's the data, that's the accountability that we expect, like corporate social responsibility from many corporate actors to be more transparent in how they use their services, how they, what do they use with the internet users' data.
Any questions from the audience? Any comments from you? If not, we are going to move to...
There is one from remote.
From remote.
So we have a question from Vladimir Svanadze. He's a chairman of the Internet Development Initiative from Georgia. So what he says is that the cybersecurity is important not only on an international but more on a national level. And the governments usually are responsible for protection of critical infrastructure. But sometimes in that case the government have to break human rights and other principles in democracy to protect critical infrastructure and national security as well. So in that sense, where does the democracy ends and starts the security? And he sees it as a serious challenge in many governments. How do you see this problem, this issue, and how the national governments shall address it?
So what I'm seeing here is that we're kind of channeling discussion in two directions at least. One is the role and responsibility of government in cybersecurity, and the other one is the role and responsibility of the business. Probably we are going to touch upon the role and responsibility of technical and civil society as well. But I'm thinking of moving on to Axel for his definition. So Axel, how do you see cybersecurity? And then we go...
Right. I don't think I have that much to contribute as to the definition of cybersecurity. I mean, Milan has done quite well, and Desiree there as well. I would like to take it a little bit further. I have heard the questions, how do we build trust? And that goes back to, as you just started saying, so many different actors in the field. There are obviously the governments, there are obviously the businesses, there's there's civil society, there are the others. And okay, I'm speaking maybe from the point of the others being a not-for-profit membership association that is built entirely on trust of its members. So my monthly salary depends on how trustworthy the RIPE NCC behaves. And with like 13,000 members, and many more people in the community, immediately here when we start verging off or veering off the good way, and there's lots of discussion about why the NCC does this or does that now. So for the last couple of years, we have quite carefully worked towards retaining trust and rebuilding trust, maybe, if that was necessary. And I see clearly transparency as one of the major contributing factors to trust building there. Accountability is another one. Why are we doing what we're doing, and what happens if we're doing it wrong, or what happens if we're doing it right? So, and that of course goes back also to the whole IANA stewardship transition discussion. Accountability is a really big point here. And so many different actors. Yes, we have in our service region, we have 76 different countries, so very many different states and law enforcement agencies and the like. And we do get, of course, occasional requests for information, some of which pertains to publicly available information, others not so much. What we do is we publish a small, very simple transparency report, basically talking about requests from law enforcement agencies to us as the registry. What did we do with this? Was it something that we could react to because it was publicly available information, or is it something that we couldn't act because we need, for instance, in this case, a Dutch court order, because we are situated in Amsterdam under Dutch law? So I think transparency is important, openness and accountability, not least.
I have a question actually to Axel. Axel, do you think that in your cooperation with governments and law enforcement, the share of when they come to you and ask you to do something, and the share of your voluntary contribution, what is this? I mean, what is more? Like, are you really keen working with them, or like, where is the balance?
Right. My first interaction with law enforcement was with a couple of FBI agents that said, please switch off that IP address. And that's something that we looked at them in awe and said, no, but we can't. But why can't you? We had to explain the whole system. We're just running a registry. We cannot switch off IP addresses. That's for the operators to agree with each other what addresses are routed and not. We are just running a registry that needs to be correct on the high level. You can start with the registry at the RIPE NCC to get information on who is using which address blocks, and then that goes to the ISP and so on. So that was my first interaction with them. And we looked at each other and said, oh dear, there's much more work coming up here. And that's something that I'm actually happy to say has become quite successful on the relatively small scale that we are doing it in terms of outreach and capacity building and information. And we've started to run a couple of simple training courses for law enforcers to basically make it clear what you're asking for is actually more or less public information. And you can go to our database interface and look it up as anybody on the street. You don't have to go through complicated processes to get us a court order. Most of the stuff that you're asking for is public. Others is not. And then, excuse me, FBI, I can't react to your subpoenas. You have to come through the Dutch court system because I'm under the Dutch law. So we do a lot of outreach there, and that's what we prioritize. And the request that we actually get for information is maybe easily countable on 2 or 3 hands.
Thank you very much.
If there are no direct comments, I thought of going now more into practical details as much as we can. So we started talking about the role of the government, the accountability of the government. My question is, instead of what should the government do, what would be the role of the government? Since I've heard a lot of noise around whether the government can be accountable and should be more involved, can we do without a government?
So, I see,
comments.
I see some comments.
Yes, we can. So, this is my computer, right? I have information on it. Am I responsible about the security of the information on my computer? Or should I go to a state authority or to someone that I trust to say, okay, get my computer and be safe with it? If someone believes that this is the situation, I'll kindly ask them to give me your computer with your passwords, and I will take care of that. I'm a very trustful guy. I have a jacket, I have a shirt. Yeah, but Vlada is my friend in this, so he has the time, he will just borrow one. So if we talk about the information, your own personal information, of course you shouldn't ask for the state to come to give you security. The same goes if we're talking about companies' data. I mean, should the government come and protect companies' data? No. You might have certain rules regarding personal data that you process where you have obligation on security, and there are special bodies that are the data protection authorities that have the ability to come and check you. But it shouldn't come some kind of secret service to check if the data that you're having is being protected. I mean, if you're so bad at it and you lost it, well, that's your problem. If we're talking about the nuclear plant IT security, then we need to discuss. That's a delicate issue and there is a role. But if we don't make this distinction, I think we are all into a cloud that no one understands what we're talking about.
Yes, so actually I was going to ask a mean question. If someone really hacks your computer, do you need a government? But then you told about nuclear plant, and then I realized that here you think that in some instances we probably might need the government.
But
like
if
crime,
someone hacks
security.
my computer, it's my problem. I didn't protect it well enough.
If someone hacks a bank and steals your money, do you?
It's the bank's problem.
Yes, I know, but don't you think that that like freeing criminals from responsibility and not involving governments as well at all in any of the issues would be kind of?
No, but you're making a big difference. So the criminal is responsible according to the penal law for the acts that they did. So they are still responsible for that, and they will be responsible for that. So it's not like, but the bank didn't use the proper IT measures. They might need to be checked by the banking authorities if they have special regulation in the place. But not to turn this into a whole cloud cybersecurity, and we need to protect everything that connects to the internet because the state wants a very secure internet. The internet is not secure, but we like it this way.
I actually agree with you. I just wanted to show the difference between different domains like company security or criminal investigations. And apparently in criminal investigations, I believe that there is something where we cannot just leave companies and users alone. Anna and then Wolf.
I'm very, very new in the cybersecurity sphere. I'm Anna from Georgia. And I got involved because I got my master thesis I'm writing on cybersecurity. And what I have in mind is, as a lawyer, I'm thinking to build my thesis saying that in order to trust internet, in order to use this public or private services, we need a secure internet. And as for the role of the government, they need to make sure and do everything in their capacities to keep the internet secure, which means, in terms of regulations, that if someone hacks my computer, I'm not in the wild jungle and there is someone who will help me first of all, get my information back if it's possible, or at least punish, or at least there must be some measures that will make me in advance feel that using internet is secure. Putting my details of my credit card on a website of, for example, Expedia.com, we all know this, yeah? I am secured, or when I'm using governmental websites, it's secure, and etc., and etc. So yes, don't minimalize the role of the government, because now you are ruining all my master thesis idea.
Okay, we'll Thank you, Anna. I think it's a lawyer talking. Vlada, I felt like we left the panel unattended. Do you have any comments?
Let me pass one more here, and Andrea, and then we go back to. I know Milan is already.
No,
nervous,
sorry.
And I'm sure
two here, and then Andrea.
I'm Sasha Midovic from Bosnia and Herzegovina. One of the jobs that I'm a court expert witness on cyber crimes, and I've seen a lot of cases. And one of the issues that I think we completely kind of avoided here, cybercrime. If someone comes to my bank and steals my money, that's okay. My human rights are really, really in danger. It's, I believe, much more than losing, because there are a number of cases where hackers broke into not a really bank, an internet banking, and stole money from companies. Companies are hurt there. I just want to make a question here. If someone comes to my apartment, enters it and steals something, who do I call? Police. What's the difference between computer and
It's your duty to secure your apartment.
Okay. If I leave it unlocked, if someone comes and opens the door of my apartment and enters, it's not it's different, but it's still criminal offense, just of a different level. I need to take measures, but I still expect police to give me certain level of protection. I'm not talking about entering my computer, doing anything like that. But if there's a criminal and cyber attacks are criminal offenses, then police needs to get involved.
We're talking about two very different things.
Yeah,
So
I think.
We're talking about IT security. Then the comparison is for the state, for the police, to come to your apartment and to tell you that you must install CCTV cameras in your apartment or to see the door in your apartment. That's the comparison that we need to do in the discussion of cybersecurity. Because what you are telling is the effects of something that has already happened. And we all agree here that if someone has done something bad on the internet, that it is a penal act, it needs to be investigated. But that's not the discussion that we're having. The discussion on the security is the so-called preemptive measures that companies, citizens, or state institutions need to do in order to offer security. The cybercrime discussion is what happens after something has happened.
My question is, why don't we have a cybercrime? I think that's the first offense. We have cybercrime.
But we have cybercrime laws. We have cybercrime. Cybercrime law provisions. We have cases of cybercrime. We have people in prison for cybercrimes. So we have that covered. But that's a different discussion. It's the discussion post-effect. It's after something has happened.
Well, I think this discussion clearly shows there are multiple responsibilities involved, multiple. So we cannot just delegate it to state and do it. So it's a question about also about control and responsibilities and finding a proper balance between these factors. I disagree in one point with you, Bogdan. You are a nice guy, you are a trustworthy person, but unfortunately we have something like organized crime. We have a lot of bad guys in the world, and we have somehow to acknowledge facts like this. And therefore I think, of course, we need a role for the state in this. But before we give more power to the state, we must make sure that this power cannot be abused. This power should be always be accountable and controlled by mechanisms in a democratic state. And this is the most difficult issue, as we know from history. And now it's getting, and your discussion has clearly showed it. It was complex in the past already. And now, with the digital age, it's getting even more complex and difficult. And Megan was pointing, there are instruments like the Cybersecurity Convention, Cybercrime Convention, and these are, in my opinion, starting points. And the whole security concept, I think for many people we have a very traditional type of a concept in our mind. And I think we need a more adapted to the new digital circumstances and context.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We have two more comments before we pass on to the floor. There are more, but okay, we'll do two more, back to the floor, and then to two of you. Thus far, what I captured that the government, that we should at least think about the government's roles when it comes to protecting the critical infrastructure and crime. So let's see what we have more.
Thank you, Vlad, and it's very entertaining, and yeah, I love this session, more than mine. No, you know, there are two cases that I wanted to raise up and made me think or rethink about cybersecurity. So as I was mentioning before, I live in Brussels, and I was following closely what happened during the attacks and before the attacks. And one thing that really struck me was that Abaoud, one of the masterminds of the attacks, both in Paris and before other attack on a train, he was very wary of using mobile phones. He used only new SIM cards, and every time he was using a different SIM cards, but not at all using the internet. He booked a hotel in Albertville, in the outskirts of Paris, with its own credit card on hotels.com. They booked the car to go from Brussels to Paris on carrentaleurope.fr using their credit cards. And everything, all these informations were there. So that made me think, we do face an issue where there is no place where all this information can get, in a way, processed or accessed by public authority to ensure that I'm paying the taxes and I want my right to be safe and secure. And the internet here plays a big role. And the way how we have to see these challenges and think that so far we didn't think about that leaves me a bit puzzled. The other case that I wanted to raise was just reading that in the case between Apple and FBI about unlocking the mobile phone of one of the targets in San Bernardino, Apple said, no, we're not going to give you this information because we want to protect the rights of our consumers. And FBI said, well, we have to go any way into this phone. So how do we do that? Well, we outsourced this to an Israeli company. And it ended up being that the US government had to pay $1 million to the Israeli company. Now, this $1 million comes from taxpayers, from us. Is that right or not? So, am I again on one side saying, no, the state should be back off, but then who else should back in? Should be the Apple backing in? Should be the hotels.com, Car Rental Europe to jump in and say, okay, we have to make sure that if there is a terrorist booking a service from us, we have to flag it up to the security forces. The problem here is that we are missing a place, a framework to have these discussions. And the more we keep missing that, the more people will seize on that. And we see how efficient or non-efficient are our security forces in, well, I can say about Brussels. And I don't know for how long we can go like that. That was my contribution.
Andrea, we forgot to say that Apple and FBI are forbidden words today. Because if we go into that, we're dead. Adel.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Adel Abusara from OSCE Mission to Serbia, and I fear that a lot of people before me have already said what I actually wanted, but I got my hands on the mic and I will say what I wanted to say. I'm kidding. I have a lot of sympathies for what my Romanian colleagues have said, and I have to say that I do understand them to a large extent. And but on the other hand, I have a feeling that after Snowden revelations and after PRISM, it's so easy to throw rotten tomatoes on the state. It's very easy to blame the state for everything. We've seen that states have abused their capabilities and their powers, and now it's very easy to say, no, and I quote, we don't want state, period. But this is not the case, and I really feel that this is going to another extreme, to the other extreme. And I really feel that we need some sort of balancing. Now, we need the state. We definitely need the state. We can argue whether cybersecurity is security or is it something completely different, or information security, something completely different. But you know, in 17th century, if people would have been able, were able to have some sort of democratic discussion, they would have said also, do we need the state or we live in Hobbesian world, you know? Homo homini lupus, everybody take care of yourself, you know? Build a fence which is strong enough. You know, protect your private property. If you don't protect it, I'm sorry. You know, I'm really sorry. Now, I feel that this is not the right discussion. We're missing the point. The point is to make a balance between the powers of the state in cybersecurity and influencing the state to the extent that we need. And for this reason, somebody already Somebody already mentioned the importance of these public-private partnerships. We need to make a state our ally. We need to make certain that states do not abuse their own powers to the extent possible, of course, but we need legal frameworks, we need strategic frameworks, and states are here to do this, you know. And we can, but I think that we can help them. Different communities, be it industrial community, be it civil society, be it this sort of Agora-speaking community, you know, we can help them. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. I know that we have a queue for further comments, but I'm going to use my moderatorial power and pass the word to the panel just quickly to reflect on what do you think about the role of the government? What do you think is the price to pay, not only in $1 million, but for example, on human rights? And what do you think about finding a balance? Do we need state? And on which conditions do we need state?
Thanks. I really enjoyed the discussion. This was really inspirational. I tried to catch some of the keywords and balance and multiple responsibilities which were mentioned. And I would like to echo on that and to actually offer and to come back to your introductory remark, Vlada, that CE security could be a model, or how was it? That we could actually maybe show something good to the world. So I'm going to offer one proof that there are things that can be better in Southeast Europe than in US, for example. You all know the FBI Apple case, and you know what's the end state. Now you have okay. Just the end state is that we have a deep divide between the state and the private company, and as a result of that, we have a key to unlock iPhones in some private companies' hands who can sell it to whoever offers more money, be it state, be it organized crime group, be it whoever, or whoever hacks into their system or whatever. So this is not a good way to go, you know, to fight each other and to try to beat each other. That's not the good way to do. In contrast to that, the end of last year we had a process in Serbia where it was an effort of multiple organizations coming from the civil society and international organizations in gathering state institutions, private sector, and civil society in like step 0 of making Serbia's cybersecurity strategy or Serbia's cybersecurity policy, or at least starting a discussion on that. And what we saw there was, through that process, it lasted. There were several events, and it lasted for some time. And what we saw was that through that process and through those interactions of state and private companies, state institutions realized, okay, you know, we need to increase our capacity, but we cannot do that without cooperating with the private sector. Private sector, on the other hand, acknowledged, okay, state can actually be a partner, and if we help them, we can help make better milieu for our business and better milieu for making money, which is the purpose of the business, of course. So by creating these inclusive processes and balancing responsibilities, I think there's a balance that can be found. So encouraging processes like that would be, in my view, that would be the case. And yes, to the point, do we need a state? I think Adel put it nicely. Do we need a state or not? Yes, I mean, that's we want to live in organized society. We decided to organize our societies in states which are not perfect, but there are some checks and balances. And we have to, there's not like an end state where we can say, okay, now it's great. We have achieved, we live in perfect democratic society. We probably will never do that. But let's work towards that. Let's not forget that we have to work towards it. And my opening remark was directed in that regard. So we have to think about efficiency. We have to think about how the state should secure our computers, or not just hunt the crimes, but also make sure that the curriculum is in schools. You remember, that's also the prerogative of state. The state should make sure that curriculum in schools is such that kids know that they should think about securing their computers. That's the role of the state, not just in hunting crimes. And we, as taxpayers, have the right to demand the state to do so. And if they have to invade our privacy to investigate a crime or to prevent a crime, we have to know that there are some accountable mechanisms like the Commissioner's Office or the Ombudsman or whoever who can go and make sure that our rights were protected, not violated. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Just a quick comment before you pass on to Desiree. What I'm capturing here, I'm trying to capture the roles that we mentioned, the roles of the government. So we had some roles when it comes to securing the critical infrastructure, when it comes to response to crime, the role related to education, and then even the role related to human rights. So yeah, we basically call upon governments to protect our human rights, right? This or not?
Yeah, it was really good to listen to all the people affected by the cyber policies that are in place or aren't yet in place. And I think Serbia has just adopted the information security law in February that needs a lot of amendments, and there's supposedly a CERT being formed right now by the end of the year. But I think the point is it's not going to be just the government CERT, there will be other CERTs. And I think this is a real show of collaboration that we need. We need internet users, NGOs, others dealing with these issues. The cooperation is essential. And to go back to the issue of trust and how we could trust the cyberspace after all these revelations and PRISM and all the massive surveillance mechanisms that are in place, I would really stand for end-to-end encryption for the internet users to protect their data, because all the examples we have seen of this mass data gathering has not been shown, has not actually shown that there is a targeted surveillance. So when we talk about criminal issues and where we need to look at terrorism, even Obama administration is split between Apple and FBI case, if you read between the line online what's been reported. So I think this is just the beginning of debate. I think cooperation rather than balance, and that end-to-end encryption in securing your data, if you can't trust the corporate section to have no breaches, if you can't trust government to have no breaches, you need as an individual user to take some of the responsibility on yourself first.
Thank you very much, Desiree. So before I will pass the word to Axel, I want to make two things. First of all, to summarize a bit, and secondly, to give a floor to the remote moderator, to the remote participant. Maybe even giving the floor to remote participant would be more important for me. So
okay, so we have a very short question from Ucha Seturi. He's an executive director of the Teleom Operation Association from Georgia. So he's asking what the audience thinks about the challenges of cybersecurity in young democracies and the temptation of censorship and the freedom in the net.
Thank you very much. I think, yes, before we will go to Axel, I will sum up, because actually the whole discussion relates to this question about the role of the government, about accountability. So maybe something for the final messages we can already take, that we don't have clearly defined domains, what is actually crime, what is critical information infrastructure, what is national security, and how human rights actually fit into all these different concepts. Then I see from the discussion in the audience that there are no clearly defined roles between the government and private industry, and there is no, the trust into the governments is not even. And thus we need balance of duties and responsibilities of public, private stakeholders and accountable stakeholders. And maybe not only governments but businesses, and trust would be one of the main issues. This is something maybe for us to know where we stand. And now, Axel, it's your time. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can link back to one of the previous sessions where we said that this community, civil society, technical community, and business and so forth, should work together to inform governments and regulators to help shaping policy. I think we're not in a vacuum, and the balance on what's the right amount of trust, what's the right amount of overview and checking on your citizens. I think that balance changes all the time, and certainly with Snowden a couple of years ago we had a major shift in awareness and data that we as citizens had on our hands suddenly. So that clearly influenced the thinking of the technical community and individuals. And where I really love the idea of keeping my front door open. I'm partially living in a rural area in Ireland, and that is something that I can do. It's great, and I really like the idea. But the internet isn't that rural, say, backwater, and end-to-end encryption certainly is something that we should all consider as one of the weights on the balance, on the seesaw. Something that we have to think about, and the balance will shift, and we'll have to readjust, clearly, all of us.
So do you think actually that all the problems we have now in cybersecurity domain and in this discussion is not only because domains are not clear, the role of the government is not clear, but also because the balance has shifted? And that's what Milan also talked about in the very beginning, about shifting balance from state security to individual security. I'm just already, because we are heading to the end of this session, I'm already thinking about our takeouts and conclusions. So, yes, for remote participants, we got a nod. So it was yes answer.
Should we move on to the audience? There were 3 gentlemen asking for the floor, so we have another 10 minutes.
I remember that Patrick was asking for the floor.
Patrick, and then the gentleman here, and then gentleman over there. We have about 10 minutes, so let's try to be concise and wrap up a little bit.
Yes, just I'm a bit puzzled with some of the discussion at times. I feel that maybe at times we're in an election campaign of Donald Trump rather than a discussion on cybersecurity and cyberspace and maybe cybercrime. At a level, first of all, we refer to governments. Okay, we can refer to governments, but I thought that since Montesquieu there was already a division of powers within a state. And I think it's important to recall that. Governments, in many, I hope in all of our states, we're speaking about a distribution of powers and a separation of powers between the judicial, the executive, and the legislative. So I think it's important to maybe also recall that. And within the Council of Europe, we primarily, of course, refer to the Cybercrime Convention and refer to what many have said regarding the need of the state and the role of the state in order to prevent crime with regards to their citizens and the role the state has and the judiciary has to do that. I don't think anyone here will, how can I say, will completely ignore the reality that we need the judiciary in order to prevent a number of things happen to the citizens of the state. So that's the first thing I wanted to make. And when we talk about cybersecurity or cybercrime, I also hear 2 different voices. On the one side, the state is not doing enough. On the other side, the state is overwhelming in what we are doing. I think it's important that we know that what the judiciary needs to be doing is determined by law. It's the lawmakers that decide what the judiciary, what the law enforcement agencies can do, and sets the constraints of this action of the law enforcement. We're not in a completely bananas republics. We're working in states where more or less this division and separation of powers is respected. And of course we need to do more in order to ensure that this separation of powers is respected, and we need to do more that what is happening in our states is legal, it is proportionate, it's legitimate, and it is within the legal framework. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Patrick. And I can tell you that there was a little bit of giggling behind when you mentioned the banana states. I'm not going to comment on that. We have a gentleman here, a gentleman there, and then a lady. Please introduce yourself.
Okay. It's Konstantin Magian, once again. So, I would like to propose you a different point of view now, from the commercial enterprises. So let's assume banks and insurance companies. Some years ago, they had all branches. And it was their decision, in order to cut cost, to move most of them to electronic form of money transfer and so on. It was no one obliged them to do that. It was their own decision just to cut cost and to have higher profits. Okay, they took some measure to prevent their system to be hacked. We assume no doubt about it. Now, if they didn't took the all necessary measures, it's up to the government to protect. That's the first question. Second question, can we assume that in order to cut costs even further, they don't take the necessary measure even if they know it, because they assume it will be the government that will do the protection? And thank you one more time.
Thank you. I have to ask the organizers if we can get another hour and a half for this session. Thank you. Okay, we have Nebojša here who is working with the CERT of the government, one of the CERTs, and we haven't mentioned the CERTs at all, and that's interesting. And now we have a government who is actually mentioning the CERT, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. I have just a few opinions. I'm Nebojša from Ministry of Interior, so I'm a government man here. I want to tell you that you cannot avoid state in cybersecurity. Government will be always there. But I agree we must find fine balance between privacy and security and respect that. And I want to add something, that's control of the government, civilian control. I think we must add that to our perspective, and I think you, internet society, must shape government's position in cybersecurity. That's a big thing. Also, just one opinion that government must or have obligation to aware citizens about cyber threats and educate them how to protect themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Nebojša. And well, you reiterated what Milan mentioned on education, but you also mentioned that there is a lot that the governments can learn from the other stakeholders, which is a very, very good point. We have a lady here.
Hi, my name is Susanya Herring. I'm from Turkey. I guess I want to wrap up with about what everyone said. First of all, I think there should be a balance. I don't think it's a solution to even imagine to get the government completely out of the equation. But the thing is, and we're talking about lawmaking and the distribution of power in banana republics, but let's not forget banana republics still exist and they are very alive, and the distribution of power in certain countries are just on paper and it's fancy. And plus, for other more evolved countries, I think the laws are not up to date. So when we're talking about there are laws to regulate all of this, they're actually not. They're being made at the moment. So if we just trust the governments completely with that, I don't think the laws we're going to have are going to make us very happy. So yeah, the balance should definitely be there, and the governments should be more transparent and include, I mean, take the multi-stakeholder approach as an example while making new laws in the new digital age.
This one worked, so I can tell. Okay. No, well this is a bit of a censorship. No, I wanted to bring a short comment on that, and I think it's quite useful because it's bringing us to to understanding that cyber, because of all these specific features, actually is a good example of a need of a cooperation among all these sectors, and that none of those can do alone and without the others. And something we are learning, and I think there was a research which you recently did. There is also a publication in a package on the experiences of partnerships within the governments, academia and business on raising the competencies in different countries, education again. So there is a lot that these stakeholders can do together. Tatiana, before I move to the last two comments here and there, is there any other comment? Anyone who wants to jump in? Okay, the two gentlemen there. Floor is yours quickly. Before I pass the mic.
I thought that I might sum up a bit to several of the last comments that rule of law is important, but laws should exist not only on paper. They should be implemented and they should be executable.
That's right. Actually, I fully agree with you. I think that we have a good example in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We have strategy fight against terrorism, which include run by our Ministry of Security, but definitely include multi-stakeholderism for the first time. When we have opportunity from the different point of view to try, because as you mentioned, it's not only on the government. We can't do that alone. We need to cover a lot of issues that needs to be done. Education, media, judicial system, enforcement panel forces also. So there is a lot of people who needs to be involved in that strategy. And the good point is that's not the final document. It's a live document. We need to see what will follow up. So many things that we are doing in countries actually related to that, to how to implement that strategy. And in that line, we saw that there is a need for the institutions to be much more open for the public, especially from the different approach from NGOs and other watchdogs who could actually help in that process. Thank you.
Just quick comment on that, actually a reminder what Nevena said at the beginning, make sure that when we are doing these strategies, cybersecurity strategies, we account human rights into that. And what Milan mentioned at the beginning, the individual approach to security, there's also a very good experience from the Freedom Online Coalition, which has a working group trying to define cybersecurity from the angle of individual security. So we should take that into account. The last comment before we wrap up.
Three quick comments. First, it's amazing how we forget the tools that we already have. The example that Andrea gave with your details of hotels.com, that are available just based on a judge warrant. It's nothing science fiction, it's the rule of law being applied. And actually, if we look at the Brussels case, we find that the information was already there. Another state police had the information, but they just didn't pass it to another one. So what does the government do? We issue a law to tell all the ones that do encryption to give some backdoors. That's very clear politics to me. The second one, about banana countries. I thought that the banana country was France because actually they suspended all the human rights for a period that is being over and over being continued. So, and that actually is very worrying for us, at least for me from the Southeast Europe, because when we go to make political debates, they said, okay, give us an example of the country. So now France is out of the question, is the worst example in this case. And the third one, I will give you a bit of background of our experience with the Romanian cybersecurity law, just to see where we are coming from. So 2 years ago, we had a draft cybersecurity law, which said that if you have any kind of cybersecurity attack, you should report to whom? To the Romanian Secret Service. So, after that, in a Senate debate, they even changed that. So they said that the Romanian Secret Service could go and do some kind of IT checks if there is some kind of IT security report. And we were just lucky that a number of MPs in the parliament sent that law to the Constitutional Court, which explained them what bullshit is being said in legal terms. So what we have this year is another law, another cybersecurity law, which comes up with a new idea. If we have any kind of attack, it needs to be supported to the Romanian Secret Service. So this is the word we are talking about, and this is the cybersecurity.
And I hope these kind of discussions, if we get more of security services ahead, can help.
I have to say thank you very much for your frank comment. Just a few weeks before Belgian event, I was at the cybersecurity session in Belgium where we did have security services. And actually a person from security services was as frank as you were. Do we need more data if we cannot process them in a right way to extract information? Do we need to collect more data? We don't even have instruments to work with them. And few weeks after, it was obvious that they don't.
Okay, we're about the time. So we have a rapporteur, but before that, to pick up the points, before that, a quick tweet from each one of our resource persons. That means a tweet, and you can try to tweet it, and if it doesn't fit in the tweet, you cut it.
Yes, we will cut it. We will count the symbols.
First?
Yes.
Should we start with Axel first?
Right, I didn't count the letters. Trust and transparency, cooperation and accountability, stakeholders need to keep checking the balance. I did not
Thank you
count.
very much.
Can you repeat it once again?
Yes, trust and transparency, cooperation and accountability, stakeholders need to keep checking the balance.
I don't know if
I don't know if it fits in the symbols, but it looks like a tweet, let's say.
Axel, you are from a technical community, right? I'll save the lady for the end, huh? Milan.
Okay, you told me you can't tweet emoticons, right? You can't do that, okay. State institutions must serve the citizens offline and online.
So once again, repeat it.
State institutions must serve the citizens both offline and online.
Thank you very much.
Completely zoom out.
Good. Des?
I'm going to introduce something new. And maybe we probably cannot protect ourselves against all risks. Start with implementing Data Protection Act by 2018 in your stakeholder group.
Thanks.
Thank you, Desiree. And I think
now we have a rapporteur, if rapporteur is ready. Fotjon, are you ready to take the floor?
So we are going to wrap up with a few messages from our rapporteurs who are doing great work and are busy wrapping up this session because there were so many interesting discussions from you.
Okay. The session main points are, so if you agree, raise your hands. Government and other stakeholders should be together in order to find best mechanism and have the more balanced cybersecurity environment.
Yeah, I think there is a general agreement in the audience. I'm also raising my hand.
Okay. The role and the responsibilities of state and other stakeholders should be more clear.
Oh, yes.
Citizens or users should take their part of responsibility in security of data computer. For example, use end-to-end encryption.
Yes. Okay. Is it more than half of the room? Oh yeah, it's more.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Was short and crisp, and I think that Vlada, this idea just came to my mind because since we are wrapping up, I believe that you should give a tweet too, but no more than 140 symbols, and I will be the last.
Can I give 3 tweets?
Oh, yeah, well, yes. But you know that we are running out of time, so give them quickly.
Retweet, retweet, retweet.
Wonderful, Vlada. And my tweet would be, thank you all very much. It was a wonderful session, and high five to Vlada as a co-focal point and co-moderator. And now out of tweet, thanks to the panel. You were awesome. Thank you.
Thank you all. Some housekeeping announcements again. We have the speakers corner happening outside, more videos from APTI.